Most people think poverty comes from one giant mistake, a failed business, a divorce, a layoff, a medical crisis. Sometimes that is true. But for millions of people, the real damage is quieter than that. It arrives in grocery bags, in monthly payments, in scratch tickets, in driveways, in streaming subscriptions. In fast food wrappers, in little receipts too small to scare anybody. That is the real machine. And if you do not understand that machine, you will keep thinking your problem is only income. Sometimes income is the problem, but very often the deeper problem is that money never survives long enough in your life to become capital. It gets intercepted, it gets seduced, it gets skimmed, it gets converted into convenience, status, emotional relief, and fake affordability before it ever has the chance to start working for you. That is where I want to begin, not with one item, with the pattern behind the items, because patterns are what trap people. A single bad purchase almost never ruins a life. A repeated purchase pattern can. That is the mother line for everything I am about to tell you. Most people do not stay poor because they buy one extravagant thing. They stay poor because they keep buying ordinary things that feel small, justified, and manageable in the moment, but which quietly destroy liquidity, compounding, and long-term financial leverage, one transaction at a time. That is the line. Read it again. Because once you understand it, you stop asking the wrong question. You stop asking why hard-working people keep staying stuck. You stop asking why the paycheck disappears so fast. You stop asking why a person can earn more and still not seem to get anywhere. You stop asking why the budget keeps feeling tight, even though there was never one huge disaster. You start asking the adult question, which purchases in my life are not only costing me money today, but also stealing the future version of that money before it ever had a chance to multiply? That is the right question. That is the profitable question. That is the question most people never ask, because daily spending disguises itself as life, and life is much harder to challenge than one obvious mistake. I learned something early that never left me. Poor thinking and wealthy thinking do not usually announce themselves with dramatic speeches. They show up in repeated habits. Poor thinking says, I have money today, so I can feel better today. Wealthy thinking says, I have money today, so I can make tomorrow less fragile. That single difference explains a shocking amount of what happens later. Because once you begin buying present relief with future capital, you are not just spending, you are selling pieces of your future freedom in exchange for comfort that usually disappears almost immediately. That is the deal most people keep making without realizing the terms. And the world is full of products built exactly to exploit that weakness. They are not sold as traps, they are sold as treats, as rewards, as convenience, as protection, as accessibility, as normal life. That is why they work so well. Now let me say something even harder. A lot of people do not become poor. They subscribe to poverty, they finance it, they insure it, they scratch it, they stream it, they drive it, they sip it, they eat it, one emotionally justified purchase at a time. That is why I do not like shallow personal finance advice. It says save more, spend less, work harder. Fine, but unless you identify the specific purchases and payment structures that keep converting income into fragility, people stay confused. I do not want you confused. I want you able to look at an everyday spending pattern and see the long-term violence hiding inside it. Because once you see that clearly, behavior changes faster. Now let me take you into the first mechanism. I call it the depreciation ambush. This is the new car problem. And I am going to be direct because the public is still lying to itself about this one. A new car is not transportation, not in the financial sense. A new car is usually a status purchase wearing work clothes. The reference document starts here and gives the exact structure. Someone gets a first decent job, earns maybe $40,000 or $50,000 a year, then signs for a $35,000 vehicle with a 6 or 7 year loan at around 8%. The file says the car loses roughly 20% of its value the moment it leaves the lot, and then another 40 to 50% over the next 5 years while the borrower is still making payments. Fay file a site, Fay turn 67, file 0 Fay, that is the depreciation ambush. And it is one of the cleanest ways to murder your financial momentum early in adult life, because the purchase feels like progress. That is why it is so dangerous. You got the job, you want the reward, you want proof that life moved, you want to drive something that tells the world and maybe tells you that you are finally doing better. The dealership understands this better than you do. It does not sell you a car first. It sells you identity, it sells you arrival, it sells you the feeling that the monthly payment means affordability. That is the lie. The monthly payment does not tell you whether the asset is intelligently priced. It tells you how long they stretched the illusion. That is why people become loyal to things that are quietly crushing them. The payment fits. The balance sheet does not. The insurance is higher. The interest is real. The depreciation is immediate. And the money that could have become an investment engine gets trapped inside a machine whose main financial talent is falling in value. The reference document contrasts this with buying a used Honda Accord or Toyota Camry a few years old, where someone else already took the worst part of the depreciation hit. That is exactly the right instinct. Fay-Felicite, Fay turned 67, file 0 Fay, because the issue is not whether a car is useful. Of course it is. The issue is whether you should volunteer to be the first owner who absorbs the largest loss. That is a terrible deal for ordinary households. If the difference between the new car and the used reliable car is $15,000, then that $15,000 is not a detail. That is capital. That is future optionality. That is retirement money. That is emergency money. That is investment money. The reference document runs that difference forward and shows how it can become $250,000 over decades if invested instead. The exact future number will vary with returns and time. But the structural point is right. The visible upgrade has a hidden opportunity cost most people never calculate. Fay-Felicite, Fay turned 67, file 0 Fay. That is what I want you to see. The real cost is not the sticker. The real cost is the compounding you interrupted to buy a newer reflection of yourself. Now, let me say something even harder. A lot of people do not buy the new car because the old car failed. They buy the new car because the old identity feels insufficient. That is a much more expensive reason. Because once spending becomes identity management, the balance sheet is no longer in charge. Your insecurity is, and insecurity loves expensive wrappers. That is why the first rule is simple. Do not finance depreciation if you are still trying to build wealth. Let somebody else take the emotional hit and the financial hit. You take the remaining useful life. That is the adult move. Now let me take you into the second mechanism. I call it the hope purchase. This is the lottery problem. And people hate hearing the truth here because the truth sounds too cruel until you realize how cruel the habit has been. The reference document says the odds of winning the Powerball jackpot are around 1 in 292 million, and that some lower income households spend about 5% of income on lottery tickets. It uses a household under $30,000 a year, spending around $120. $5 a month as an example. Whether the exact household average varies, the larger point remains the same. A meaningful slice of scarce income gets traded for fantasy. Fay-Felicite, Fay turned 67, file 0 Fay. That is the hope purchase. And it is one of the ugliest financial products in the country because it monetizes desperation without ever calling itself. That a person feels cornered, stuck, underpaid, tired, late. He cannot see a clean ladder, so he buys a miracle, $5, $10, a scratch, off at the gas station. A quick little shot of possibility. Something to interrupt the feeling that tomorrow looks too much like today. I understand why that is emotionally attractive. That does not make it financially innocent, because every ticket is not just a tiny expense. It is a vote against process, a vote against compounding, a vote for sudden rescue instead of steady escape. That is the part I want people to understand. The lottery is not mainly a math problem. It is a worldview problem. It trains people to associate freedom with luck instead of with repetition. That is fatal. The reference document compares $125 a month in lottery spending to what that same amount could become over 30 years if invested. Again, the future value depends on market returns, but the logic is what matters. Small recurring hope purchases can equal a retirement-sized pool of money if redirected into productive assets. Fay-Felicite, Fay turned 67, file 0 Fay. That is what makes this so tragic. The poor are not merely overpaying for entertainment. They are selling away future optionality to buy a fantasy of rescue in the present. And the fantasy almost never delivers. I want to be careful here. I am not saying people buy tickets because they are stupid. They buy them because they are human, because hope feels necessary when the ladder looks far away. Fine, but hope without structure becomes a tax. And the lottery is one of the cleanest examples of that. The real way out is boring. Save, invest, repeat, protect. That is not sexy. That is why it works. Boring is rarely what keeps people poor. The constant search for exciting escape does. Now, let me take you into the third mechanism. I call it the emergency predator. This is the payday loan problem, and I do not intend to sound diplomatic about it. The reference document lays out the structure plainly. Borrow $500 now, repay $570, 2 weeks later, and the implied annual rate can exceed 390%. It also points out that more than 80% of payday loans get rolled over or renewed quickly. meaning the borrower pays fee after fee, while the original problem often remains alive. Fay file a site, Fay turn 67 file 0 Fay, that is not finance. That is predation. The business only works because the borrower is already weak. That is the whole model. No one uses a payday loan because life is going well. They use it because the rent is due. The car broke, the utility is about to shut off, the child needs something, the job cannot be missed, and there is no room. That is why liquidity matters so much. Cash is not there to impress anyone. Cash is there so you do not become raw material in somebody else's extraction machine the first time life turns ugly. That is the emergency predator. A person thinks he is solving a 2-week problem. In reality, he is often beginning a multi-month bleed. The fee becomes another emergency, then another, then another. And soon the original $500 matters less than the rolling sequence of fees that attach themselves to desperation. This is one reason I tell people to stop treating emergency funds as optional. They are not optional. They are your anti-predator shield. The reference document says even a small emergency fund is the real antidote here, and that alternatives like a landlord extension, a utility payment plan, or an employer advance are usually far less destructive. That is correct. Fay file site Fay turn 67 file 0 Fay, because the right question in an emergency is not what is the fastest cash. It is what cash solves this without signing away 3 months of future breathing room. That is a very different question. Now let me say something harsher. A lot of households think they are poor because they are unlucky. Sometimes they are poor because they are underinsured where it matters and overspending where it does not. If you have no emergency fund but you have recurring convenience spending, entertainment leaks, or image spending, then part of the crisis is self-constructed. That is not a moral insult. It is a strategic observation. The emergency predator only wins because there was no buffer. Build buffer and the whole category of danger begins to lose its teeth. Now let me take you into the fourth mechanism. I call it the payment illusion. This is the rent to own furniture and electronics trap. And I want you to notice how similar it is to the car problem, not in object in psychology. The object is not really the product. Immediate possession is the product. The reference document gives the perfect example. A sofa advertised at $69 a month for 72 months ends up costing nearly $5,000 for something that might retail new for around $1,200. The monthly payment looks survivable, so the total cost disappears from view. Fay file site Fay turn 67 file 0 Fay, that is the payment illusion. And it survives because people shop by monthly pain instead of lifetime cost. A low monthly payment is not proof of affordability. It is often camouflage. It tells you almost nothing about value. What it tells you is how long someone was willing to stretch your future to make the product look reachable. That is why I keep telling people never to shop by payment. Ever shop by total cost. Total cost tells the truth. Payment only tells a story. And stories sold at the register are usually expensive. The deeper issue here is emotional. A person wants the room to look finished. Now the television to be large. Now the apartment to feel like the next stage. Now the household cannot afford now. So the market offers a compromise. You can have the image now and let the next 6 years pay for it. That is insane. Not because furniture is evil, because the future you did not consent to become the financing source for a lifestyle pose in the present. The reference document recommends used furniture, estate sales, thrift stores, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, and patience. That is exactly how adults handle this phase. Fay felicite, Fay turn 67, file 0 Fay not, because used is romantic. Because premature finished is expensive. A lot of people are trying to decorate a life that their balance sheet has not yet earned. That is what rent to own monetizes premature arrival. And once you see it, the whole industry becomes transparent. It is not selling a couch. It is selling the illusion that you can skip the stage of building and jump straight to the stage of looking built. That always costs more than people think. Now let me take you into the fifth mechanism. I call it the safety theater. This is the extended warranty and gadget insurance problem. And it is sneaky because it disguises itself as prudence. The reference document walks through this in detail. Many products already carry a manufacturer warranty. Many credit cards extend that warranty. Then the buyer gets offered another protection plan anyway, often on a small device or medium-size electronic with a deductible or conditions attached. The total paid can easily exceed the realistic probability, adjusted loss. Fay file a site Fay turn 67 file 0 Fay. That is the safety theater. And it works because Fear sells beautifully at the register. What if it breaks? Good question. What is the actual chance? What is the replacement cost? What would the total premium amount to over the product? S life. What other protections already exist? Could you self-insure this risk more cheaply with cash reserves? Those are the adult questions. Nobody asks them because the product is already in hand and the extra monthly or one-time cost feels small enough to disappear into the total. That is why the trap works. It turns low probability nuisance events into recurring revenue streams for sellers while the buyer keeps telling himself he is being careful. Careful about the phone, careless about the household. That is the inversion. People keep insuring little discomforts while failing to insure the actual thing that would protect them from a financial shock: cash, liquidity, flexibility. The reference document makes exactly that point. It says the only things really worth insuring are exposures that would genuinely damage you financially, like health, housing, car liability, maybe life, depending on your structure. Everything else is often better self-insured by saving the premium yourself. Fay-File-A-Site, Fay-Turn-67, File 0 Fay, yes. Because insurance should protect catastrophe, not every annoyance. A household that cannot replace a phone but can somehow afford monthly phone insurance forever is not safer. It is trapped in the wrong layer. The real answer is not to buy more tiny protections. It is to build one larger protection: reserves. That is why I call it safety theater. It performs caution without creating actual strength. Now let me take you into the sixth mechanism. I call it the sedation bill. This is the cable plus streaming problem. But really it is bigger than that. It is the broader problem of paying recurring monthly fees to stay numbed. The reference document says some lower income households still pay $200 a month across cable, internet bundles, and multiple streaming services. It then runs that forward into what the same money could become over 10 years if redirected and invested. Fay-File-A-Site, Fay-Turn-67, File 0 Fay, that is the sedation bill. And the reason it matters is that recurring comfort is more dangerous than occasional luxury. Luxury purchases hurt once. Recurring comforts disappear into the wallpaper. That is why they survive budget cuts. One service looks harmless, two services feel normal, 3 or 4 plus cable, plus internet, plus add-ons becomes a real number. The household does not notice because each piece is emotionally justified. I work hard, I need to relax, I want the kids to have something. I deserve this. Fine, maybe you do deserve rest. That is not the same as deserving every recurring fee the market can attach to your fatigue. The modern economy is brilliant at converting tiredness into subscriptions. That is what you are really buying most of the time. Not joy sedation, a smoother evening, a less noisy house, a reliable distraction. And if you do not evaluate those purchases honestly, they become a permanent bill for emotional management that is expensive. Not because entertainment is evil, because permanent emotional management bills crowd out permanent asset formation. The reference document suggests rotating services, cutting back, using only 1 or 2 at a time, and being intentional. That is exactly the right instinct. Fay-File-A-Site, Fay-Turn-67, File 0 Fay, because adulthood is not saying no to all pleasure. Adulthood is ranking pleasure against freedom. That is the difference. A person can absolutely enjoy some entertainment. But if the monthly sedation bill is so normal that it never faces scrutiny, then it becomes a quiet tax on the future. That is what most households miss. The issue is not the specific platform. It is the recurring pattern of paying to stay comfortably passive while telling yourself the number is too small to matter. Over 10 years, it matters. Over 20, it matters a lot. Now let me take you into the seventh mechanism. I call it the convenience drain. This is the fast food, gas station, daily coffee, quick lunch pattern, and this is where poverty often gets built in a way so ordinary that almost nobody feels guilty enough to stop it. The reference document closes with this exact point. It talks about daily lunch purchases, convenience, store markups, Starbucks, style coffee spending, and routine takeout. It compares the small daily outlay with what the same money becomes over 10 years if redirected into investing. Fay-File-A-Site, Fay-Turn-67, File 0 Fay, that is the convenience drain, and it is one of the deadliest spending patterns in personal finance because every individual transaction looks too minor to interrogate. $5, $10, a snack, a drink, lunch delivery, a coffee, because the morning was rough. One stop on the way home because cooking feels like too much. None of these purchases by themselves look like poverty. Repeated long enough, they become architecture. That is the difference between a bad habit and a bad life structure. The public keeps asking, "What's the big deal? It's only $10. Wrong question. The real question is, what does $10 a day, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year do to my future if I normalize it for 10 or 20 years? That is the adult question. The answer is ugly. Not because lunch is evil, because repeated convenience is premium price disorganization. That is the truth most people do not want to hear. A great deal of lower and middle income spending is not really about enjoying life. It is about paying more because planning was too weak, time was too fragmented, energy was too low, or discipline was too disorganized to do the cheaper version. That is not a moral insult. It is a structural observation. The solution is not simply never buy lunch. The deeper solution is to build a life that does not keep generating the same little emergencies of appetite. Meal prep, coffee at home, bulk buying, intentional days for eating out, rules, routines, friction reduction. That is how adults stop the leak. The reference document shows how daily convenience can become thousands a year and tens of thousands over time. The specific totals vary, but the structural lesson is completely sound. Repeated convenience is often invisible because it is ordinary. That is exactly why it does so much damage. Fay file site Fay turn 67 file 0 Fay. Nay, let me say something harder. A lot of people think they are bad at money. Often they are not bad at money. They are simply paying premium prices to avoid tiny discomforts all day long. Coffee takes 10 minutes. Lunch takes planning. Groceries take thought. Convenience is sold as efficiency. A lot of the time it is just expensive disorganization with good branding. That is the convenience drain. And if you stop it, money starts staying in your life long enough to matter. Now let me step back and show you the whole machine. The new car taxes you through depreciation. The lottery taxes you through fantasy. The payday loan taxes you through desperation. The rent-to-own contract taxes you through monthly illusion. The warranties tax you through fear. The subscriptions tax you through sedation. The convenience purchases tax you through disorganization. That is not 7 random bad ideas. That is one operating system for staying poor. And once you see it that way, the entire subject becomes much more serious. You stop saying, it is only one thing. It is never one thing. It is a repeated pattern. Patterns build outcomes. That is the law. The rich are not necessarily better because they never make mistakes. They are often better because they stop repeating certain expensive patterns earlier. That is the edge pattern interruption. Now let me make the identity flip explicit. Most people think escaping poverty means finding one big break or making dramatically more money. That is too small. The deeper shift is learning to stop buying the exact products, payment structures, and convenience habits that convert ordinary income into permanent fragility before that income ever gets the chance to become savings, assets, and compounding. That is the flip. A poor thinker asks, "Can I buy this today?" A wealth builder asks, "What future am I buying if I normalize this for the next 10 years?" A poor thinker sees the price. A wealth builder sees the pattern. A poor thinker wants immediate relief. A wealth builder wants permanent leverage. Those are different minds. They create different lives. Now let me bring the operating system together in plain language first. Stop financing depreciation. Second, stop paying for fantasy. Third, never let short-term emergency cash turn into long-term predatory debt again, if you can help it. Fourth, never shop by payment. Fifth, ensure catastrophe. Not every little object. Sixth, stop sedating yourself with recurring subscriptions you barely value. Seventh, treat convenient spending like a leak, not like a harmless daily habit. That is the operating system, not shame, not perfection. Conscious routing of money away from traps and toward ownership. Now let me put the blade into this as cleanly as I can. The 7 things Warren Buffett would tell you to stop buying immediately are not dangerous because they are flashy sins. They are dangerous because they are ordinary. They look small enough to excuse, common enough to normalize, and affordable enough to repeat. That is why they do so much damage. And if you remember nothing else from what I said, remember this. People do not usually buy poverty in one giant purchase. They finance it, scratch it, insure it, stream it, sip it, eat it, and drive it home one emotionally justified transaction at a time. Break that pattern, and your financial life starts changing long before your income ever does.